My daughter banned me from walking her down the aisle because I'm a trucker and poor, but when her drunk mother destroyed her dream wedding, she came back crying and begging me to rescue her. I'm 51 years old, I'm a truck driver, and I've gone almost 3 weeks without talking to my daughter Ashley because she basically told me I'm too poor and common for her wedding. And honestly, after raising her alone for 17 years, after sacrificing absolutely everything for her, I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive her. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I met Margaret, because all of this comes from there. From that decision I made when I was like 24 and thought I knew what love was. Margaret and I got married young, like we met at a local bar when she was 22 and I was 24. And we fell in love in that intense and kind of silly way that only happens when you're young and have no idea what's waiting for you in life. We both came from working class families. You know, nothing special. My parents had a small hardware store that barely made ends meet, and hers worked in a textile factory. We got married after dating for like a year and a half, in a super simple ceremony, at the courthouse, because we didn't have money for a real wedding, and we rented a small apartment on the outskirts of town. I was working as a short-haul truck driver back then, didn't make much, but it was enough to pay rent and eat decently, and Margaret worked part-time at a clothing store while finishing an accounting course she never completed. When Ashley was born, everything changed. I mean, it was beautiful but also terrifying because suddenly we were responsible for this tiny little person who depended completely on us. Margaret decided to stay home to take care of her, which made sense because childcare was so expensive. So I started working more hours to compensate. I went from doing short routes to taking longer trips, sometimes 2 or 3 days, and there were weeks where I barely saw Ashley awake because I'd leave before dawn and come back when she was already asleep. I'm not complaining. I mean, it was what had to be done, but looking back, I think Margaret felt lonely during those years, and I was too busy trying to keep everything afloat to realize it. Ashley's first 7 years were normal, I guess, in the sense that we were a typical working-class family doing the best we could with what we had. We lived tight, we didn't go on expensive vacations or anything like that, but we also didn't lack food on the table, and Ashley had clean clothes and toys, not many, but enough. I worked like 14 hours a day, including travel times. And Margaret took care of the house and Ashley, and on weekends we tried to do things together like go to the park or watch movies at home. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Or, at least I thought it worked. Everything went to hell when Ashley turned 7. Margaret had been restless for months, saying she needed to do something more than just take care of the house, that she felt trapped. And I supported her because she was right. She needed to have her own life too. She got a job as a waitress at a new cafe that had opened in the fanciest part of town, one of those places where coffee costs like $5, and all the customers wear expensive suits and talk about business. At first, everything seemed fine. Margaret was happier, had her own money. Ashley was already in school, so the schedule worked. But after like 3 months, I noticed Margaret started coming home late, sometimes smelling like alcohol. And when I'd ask, she'd say that people from work had gone out for drinks, or that she'd had to stay to close up. Turns out, she had met William at the cafe. William was, or well is, a rich guy, about 53 years old at the time, now he's like 60, never been married, inherited his father's construction business, and basically lives off rental income and making deals with real estate developers. He went to the cafe every day, always ordered the same thing, and apparently started flirting with Margaret from the beginning. She told me all this later, when it was already too late. Told me that at first it was just friendly conversation, but that he made her feel special. Invited her to fancy places when I was on the road. I bought her things I could never buy her. And me, like an idiot not finding out about anything, working my 14 hours a day, thinking I was building a future for my family. The night everything exploded was a Friday. I remember perfectly that I had just gotten back from a long trip to another state, and I was exhausted. Margaret came home past 11 at night, completely drunk, and Ashley was asleep in her room. I was on the couch watching TV, and when I saw her stumble in, I knew something was very wrong. She sat on the chair across from me, didn't even look me in the eyes, and said, "I have to tell you something. I'm seeing someone else, and I want a divorce." Just like that, no preamble, no trying to soften it. I just sat there in shock because I literally didn't know what to say, like my brain wasn't processing the words I had just heard. I asked her how, since when, Who? And she just said, his name is William. He's from the cafe. I've been with him for 6 months. He's going to help me financially, and I need this to be quick because I don't want to stay here anymore. You know what it feels like when the person you built your life with tells you that you basically don't matter to her anymore? It's like the floor disappears beneath your feet. I asked her what would happen with Ashley, hoping that at least that would make her think, but Margaret just said, "You can keep her. You're a better father than I am, a mother anyway. And I need time for myself." She didn't even fight for shared custody, didn't even pretend she cared. She signed the divorce papers in record time, moved into an apartment William paid for, and basically disappeared from our lives, except for sporadic visits when it was convenient for her. So there I was, 34 years old, divorced, with a 7-year-old girl who didn't understand why her mom had left, working impossible shifts to be able to pay for everything alone. The next 17 years were basically me raising Ashley completely alone. I became dad and mom at the same time. Learned to do ponytails even though they turned out horrible. Went to all the school meetings, helped with homework. Cooked meals that were often a disaster, but at least they were food, did laundry, cleaned the house, all while continuing to work crazy long hours so we wouldn't lack anything. I stopped going out with friends because I didn't have time or energy. Stopped thinking about having a romantic life because Ashley was my priority. Basically put my life on pause for almost 2 decades to make sure she had everything she needed. Meanwhile, Margaret would show up every 2 or 3 months with expensive gifts for Ashley. Things I could never buy her. Like designer clothes, new phones, laptops, jewelry. All bought with William's money, obviously, because she was still working at the cafe, but her salary wasn't enough for those things. And Ashley, being a kid, and then a teenager, obviously got excited about the gifts, and I became the boring father who could only offer her stability and love, but not expensive material things. Margaret would take her to fancy restaurants, to spas, shopping in the city, and then return her home to me where we had to go back to the reality of a middle-class life where there's no money left over for luxuries. The thing is that Ashley and I had a good relationship during her childhood and early adolescence, or at least that's what I thought. She told me things about school, we watched shows together, I went to all her school events, even if I had to switch shifts at work to do it. But when she turned 18 and started working as a stylist at a beauty salon, she started distancing herself. She spent more time with Margaret, went more often to that luxurious apartment. William kept paying for my ex, and started making comments about how our house was small or outdated, about how it would be nice to have a newer car, things like that had never mattered to her before. Like 2 years ago, Ashley met Christopher at a party for one of her salon clients. Christopher comes from a wealthy family. Like really wealthy. His father is a corporate lawyer, and his mother is one of those women who have never worked a day in their lives but organize charity events and belong to exclusive clubs. At first, Ashley didn't tell me much about him, just that they were dating. But after a few months, she started talking about how incredible his family was, how educated they were, how different that world was compared to ours. And me like an idiot thinking she was just excited about her new boyfriend, not realizing that she was basically saying she was ashamed of me and our life. 8 months ago, Christopher proposed to her with a ring that probably cost more than I make in 6 months, and Ashley was over the moon. She started planning the wedding immediately, talking about expensive venues, designer dresses, imported, flowers, all that stuff. I assumed Christopher's family would pay for most of it because obviously I couldn't afford a wedding like that. And turns out, yes, they were paying for everything, which made me feel a little uncomfortable, but, well, if they wanted to do it that way, it wasn't my problem. Ashley would come home occasionally to tell me about the plans, always in a hurry, always looking at her phone, and I tried to seem interested, even though honestly everything sounded excessive and ridiculous for my taste. Like 3 months into planning, Ashley came over to the house on a Sunday afternoon and told me, "Dad, I need to talk to you about the wedding." We sat in the living room. She had that uncomfortable face she makes when she has to say something she knows I'm not going to like, and said, "I've decided we're not going to do the tradition of the father walking the bride down the aisle." I stared at her, not understanding, and asked her why. And she started with a speech about how that tradition is patriarchal and outdated, about how women aren't property that gets transferred from one man to another, basically repeating things she had obviously read on the internet. And I, even though it hurt, told her it was okay, that it was her wedding, and I respected her decision, that the important thing was that she be happy. But something didn't add up. You know, I had that feeling in my stomach that there was something more she wasn't telling me. Ashley left that afternoon, and I was left thinking about the whole conversation, about how she had avoided looking me in the eyes, about how she had spoken very quickly, like when she lies. I didn't think much of it initially because I had a long trip the next day and needed to focus on that, but the doubt was still there in the back of my mind. Turns out, like 2 weeks later, I was at a local restaurant having lunch between trips, and I heard some women at the table next to me talking about a wedding. One of them mentioned Ashley's name, and obviously I paid attention, and that's when I heard one say, "Did you hear it's going to be William who walks her down the aisle? How weird, right? I mean, he's not even her biological father, he's her mom's lover." I froze, literally felt like I'd been hit in the stomach with a baseball bat. I paid my bill and got out of there before they could see my face because I felt like I was going to throw up, or scream, or both. I got home shaking with rage. I couldn't believe Ashley had lied to me like that she had given me that speech about patriarchy when she really just wanted William, the guy who destroyed our family, to be the one to walk her down the aisle. I sent her a message saying we needed to talk urgently, and she arrived like 2 hours later, all nervous. I confronted her directly, told her I had found out about William, and at first she tried to deny it, but when she saw my face, she broke down and admitted everything. She told me, yes, she had decided to ask William to walk her down the aisle, that Margaret had been the one to suggest the idea, that she felt it was fair because he had been generous with her all these years. And when I asked her why she had lied to me instead of telling me the truth, she got defensive and let out everything she really thought. She told me, looking at me with that contemptuous face I'll never forget, "Did you really think I was going to ask you to walk me down the aisle? Dad, don't be ridiculous, but Christopher's family is on another level. They're sophisticated people, educated, and you're a truck driver. You don't fit in that world, and honestly, I'd be embarrassed for Christopher's family to see you there as if you were someone important in my life. William at least knows how to behave in those environments, knows what to talk about, looks presentable. You're just a middle-class piece of junk who could never give me the life I deserved." I'm not exaggerating. Those were her exact words, middle class, piece of junk. This girl I raised alone for 17 years, who I fed, who I dressed, who I took to school every day for years, for whom I sacrificed absolutely everything, including my own happiness, called me junk because I don't have enough money, or I'm not refined enough for her new in-laws. I sat there in silence while she kept talking, justifying herself, telling me I should understand her position, that it wasn't personal, but that's just how things were. And in that moment, something broke inside me. Like physically, I felt like something in my chest split in two. I told her as calmly as I could that it was fine, that she had made her decision and I would make mine too. I told her I wouldn't attend her wedding, that if I wasn't good enough to walk her down the aisle, then I definitely wasn't good enough to sit among the guests watching her celebrate her new life. Ashley got angry, told me I was overreacting, that it was her wedding and I should be there anyway, but I told her to leave my house and not contact me again. She left screaming that I was dramatic and selfish, and that was the last time we spoke face to face. The following months, I blocked her on everything: phone, social media, email, everything. I didn't want to know anything about the wedding, anything about her preparations, anything about her period. Some mutual acquaintances wrote to me saying I should reconsider, that she was my daughter and I was going to regret it. But none of them knew what had really happened. What she had said to me, how she had treated me after everything I had done for her. I felt lonely during that time, very lonely, because basically my only family had thrown me out of her life like I was nothing. The wedding was like 3 weeks ago. Obviously, I didn't go. I stayed home watching TV and trying not to think about what was happening. But turns out I found out about everything that happened because it was an absolute disaster, and half the town talked about it afterwards. Apparently, Margaret arrived at the ceremony completely drunk, like couldn't walk straight, and during the cocktail hour before the ceremony, she started flirting super inappropriately with Christopher's father in front of all the guests. Christopher's mother was horrified. The guests were uncomfortable. and William tried to control her, but she completely ignored him. In the middle of the ceremony, while the officiant was talking, Margaret started laughing out loud about something, and when William tried to calm her down, she stood up and started yelling at him in front of everyone. She told him she was sick of him, that they'd been in this toxic relationship for years where he constantly cheated on her with other women, that he had never married her like he'd promised, that basically he only used her when it was convenient. William tried to get her out of the place, but she kept screaming, revealing things about his affairs, about how he treated her badly, about how all the money he gave her was to keep her quiet. It was a complete spectacle, with Margaret crying and screaming, William furious trying to control her, and Ashley in shock watching her perfect wedding fall apart. Christopher's parents and several guests left at that moment, like they literally stood up and walked out of the place because it was already too uncomfortable. The ceremony technically got completed, but the reception was a disaster because like half the guests weren't there anymore, and those who stayed were only talking about the scandal. Ashley tried to save the situation, but it was impossible. Her dream wedding had become the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons. The day after the wedding, like at 10 inches the morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I normally don't answer numbers I don't know, but something made me answer, and it was Ashley crying hysterically. Turns out she was calling me from a friend's phone because I had her blocked. She was begging me to help her, that she needed, to me to talk to Christopher's family, to explain to them that she wasn't like her mother, that our family wasn't really like that I could vouch that she was different. She was telling me that Christopher's parents were considering asking their son to annul the marriage because after the wedding disaster, they doubted Ashley came from a decent family. I listened to her cry and beg for several minutes without saying anything, and when she finally finished, I told her, no, that I wasn't going to help her. I told her she had chosen her family when she decided William was a better father than me, that she had chosen her social status when she said I was a piece of junk who embarrassed her, and that now she had to live with the consequences of those decisions. I told her Margaret and William were her family now, not me, and they could fix the mess they had created. Ashley started screaming that I was cruel. How could I abandon her at the worst moment of her life? But I hung up on her and blocked her friend's number again. Like 2 days later, I got an email from her. A long email where she kind of apologized but also blamed me. She said yes. Maybe she had been harsh with me, but I was overreacting by not going to her wedding, that a real father would have been there no matter what. That by not showing up to help her after the disaster, I had shown her that I never really cared as much as I said, basically trying to flip everything to make me the bad guy in the story. As if the last 17 years of sacrifice meant nothing because I didn't run to rescue her when she needed it. I didn't respond to that email or any of the others she sent me after. I've maintained total silence for these 3 weeks, and honestly, I feel more at peace than I've felt in years. Yes, it hurts. Obviously it hurts because she's my daughter and I raised her alone and gave her everything I could, but I also feel liberated in some weird way. For 17 years, my life revolved completely around her, needs, making her happy, making sure she didn't lack anything, and in the end, she treated me like I was nothing, like everything I did wasn't worth it, because it didn't come with enough money or social status. I've been using this time for myself for the first time in almost 2 decades. I joined a local motorcycle club, something I always wanted to do but never had time for, and I've made friends there. People my age who've gone through divorces and family problems and who understand what I'm going through. We go out on weekends to ride routes, stop at roadside bars. Basically, I do things I enjoy without feeling like I have to be available for someone else all the time. Last week, my friends from the club helped me make a profile on a dating app, something I never thought I'd do, but, well, I'm 51 years old and I don't plan to be alone for the rest of my life. I already have my first date scheduled for next Friday with a woman named Casey, who's also divorced and has grown kids. I don't. I know if it's going to work, but at least I'm trying. I'm putting my happiness first for once in my life. And that feels good. It feels right after so long putting myself last.